Week 4 of the NFL season is officially in the books, and boy did we have some upsets this week. So in today's video, I want to go through week 4 of the 2025 NFL season and give my reaction and biggest takeaways to this week. Subscribe and like the video if you're going to enjoy. Let's hop into it. And we are going to begin with our Thursday night football matchup between the Arizona Cardinals and the Seattle Seahawks. So for this game, obviously this happened Thursday, so I won't go into too much detail in this one because I want to talk about the Sunday games that we just witnessed, but Thursday night football was a pretty fun game that even though the score was 23-20, it did feel like Seattle, for the most part, held possession of the football and just managed the game really well. It always felt like Seattle was going to find a way to win this game. It got a little bit dicey later in the game, but you got to give credit to the Seahawks defense for holding in there. Arizona made some plays late. I think the biggest thing that Cardinals fans should be hopeful for in the future is that Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like he got his mojo back. In the first half, he had multiple drops. He had a route that he just did not complete that led to a pick. Fortunately, they fumbled it, but it still led to an interception. And he also had the drop pass that also led to a pick. So Marvin Harrison Jr. was basically hurting the team in the first half until he got a couple passes going his way, and then he made the big spectacular plays later in the matchup. The game was a bit too far out of reach by the point that Marvin Harrison did get going, but at the bare minimum, it does look like there is some sort of connection building between Kyler Murray and Marv, which is very important for this team. Defensively, they're really good. They held Seattle in check for most of the game. JSN did not have a big one. But eventually, sooner rather than later, of course, the Seahawks offense was eventually going to get something going. And they did. They got things going in the first half. And when they needed to put up some points late, they were able to do so. Big credit to Sam Darnold, who I think has done a very good job of just managing this offense. Something that Geno Smith had to do a lot of the time last year was he had to be Superman, but he was just not equipped to be that guy. Sam Darnold is just doing a perfect job of just managing this team. He's being the perfect game manager, which is exactly what this team requires. So good job for him. Good job for the Seahawks. A divisional win versus a good opponent. Good victory. Next up, let's talk about our Sunday morning game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I came into this game and I did predict the Vikings to win because I thought for the most part this Vikings defense was going to absolutely obliterate the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but that wasn't really the case. Now, give credit to Minnesota and their defense. I thought they played better at certain points, but man, they got diced up in the rushing game. Kenneth Gainwell had a nice day. Aaron Rodgers was clean with the football on the day. 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles. Compare that to Carson Wentz and the Vikings, who had 2 interceptions. They also had more penalties. They were worse on 4th down. It was just one of those performances where one team just happened to be the better team that day. I'm starting to get a little bit worried about the Minnesota Vikings because I just don't know who this team is right now, and it's hard to really judge whether or not JJ McCarthy is the guy that can really get this team over the top. They have a very talented roster, but man, they're struggling to pass protect right now. This game, they gave up 6 sacks to TJ Watt and some really good players, but still, this is supposed to be a top-tier offensive line, and they're not really acting like it right now. As for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I had a lot of questions heading into this game, but they really did prove me wrong in a lot of different ways. They handled their business. They played good on offense and on defense. They forced more turnovers. They shut them down on 3rd down, forced them to go for it 3 times on 4th down. They just did a really good job defensively of making the game difficult. And then on the offensive end, they got the ball going with the run game, and then things opened up in the passing game too. So really nice day. Shout out DK Metcalf for some big plays too. Pittsburgh gets the win, and I'm feeling a lot better about Pittsburgh now than I was heading into this week. Moving on, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons defeating the Washington Commanders 34-27. Now, it's very important to mention that Marcus Mariota did get the start for this Washington Commanders team and that it was not Jaden Daniels, so keep that in the back of your mind. But look, the Atlanta Falcons, they handled their business. Michael Penix Jr. got going in this game. They opened things up a little bit more downfield. Finally, that connection between Drake London and Michael Penix started to show a little bit of some life here. We saw Kyle Pitts get involved. Bijan Robinson was all over the field today, and it was just nice to see a plethora of different guys get the ball, especially those very high draft pick guys. Again, Bijan, London, Kyle Pitts, they got the ball, they made the plays, not like a Ray McLeod or anything like that. No offense to him, but you want to see your top picks go and actually make plays. They did so in this game. Offensively, they made plays. This is a Commanders team that, even though they don't have Jaden Daniels, is still pretty darn good on the offensive end. We saw Mariota last week play really well, and in this this one, he made some nice throws and made some nice plays, but ultimately, without that X factor in Jaden Daniels, it was just a lot to overcome here. Washington struggled mightily on third down, 1 for 8, only 17 first downs, only 294 total yards. They made some things happen late to make the score look a little bit more respectable, but for the most part, Atlanta held their business. The biggest thing I could talk about in this game for both these teams is that Washington's still a really good team. They're just missing their quarterback. I don't think they're an elite team. I do think they're like a borderline playoff team. Whereas for the Atlanta Falcons, you finally got Michael Penix Jr. going. You're getting some of your other superstars going as well. And it's really important now to roll this game over into the next one. So we'll see if they can continue to work this thing out. Next up, let's talk about the New York Giants upsetting the LA Chargers 21-18. So there's a few things I want to avoid when I talk about this game. I do not want to overreact to Jackson Dart playing and winning this game, but at the same time, I also don't want to underreact here too. I do want to give this a bit of a fair assessment in terms of how good the Giants actually looked in this game. Before we do that though, I do want to talk about the Chargers side of things. Look, this was a trap game and they fell for the trap. After 3 straight games versus AFC West opponents, they had a matchup versus a Giants team they haven't faced in a few years, and well, they played like they had not seen this team in quite some time. Justin Herbert was struggling all day, 2 interceptions. One thing that did get going though was Amari Hampton. He had multiple big plays. They struggled in pass protection all day. I know he only got sacked twice, but it felt like Herbert was always under duress and just having to make plays, and it was tough on him. Some of the interceptions were tough out there too. I thought they did better than what the numbers say, but man, without Joe Alt for most of the game, without Rashawn Slater, this offensive line is quite questionable. By the way, Quentin Johnston is clearly wide receiver 1 for this team. It's weird how Ladd McConkey has sort of just fallen down the depth chart a little bit, which is totally fine. QJ's playing very good. Now, on the interesting side of things here with the New York Giants, man, the Giants, they kind of dominated this game in some ways. Some things didn't go their way, especially late in the first half where you had the Abdul Carter offsides, and then you had the big touchdown to, I think, Quentin Johnston, which allowed the game to be a little bit closer heading into halftime. And it always felt like the Giants were going to lose this game. It just always felt like the Chargers at some point were going to mount a drive, take the lead, and then it was just going to be difficult for the Giants to overcome it. But give credit to this defense, they played really well. Now let's talk about Jackson Dart. Did Jackson Dart have the greatest rookie debut of all time? No. But I will give Jackson Dart a ton of credit. No turnovers on the day. He ate a lot of sacks. A couple of them were his fault. A couple of them weren't his fault. But he got the ball where he needed to go to. He made a couple of nice third down throws. He ran the ball well. One thing I was talking about with my watch along was that it felt like LA was not prepared for the legs of Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart was running all over the field, and it really opened up this offense for this team. Cam Scatterbo continues to be the RB1 for this team, and you pair up Jackson Dart with Scatterbo. You got 2 guys that can legitimately move and run and play very well, so that's really exciting for the future of this team. One negative note, Malik Neighbors is likely out for the season. This is an absolute bummer for the New York Giants. This has been a team that's sort of just been waiting and kind of procrastinating in a way to throw in Jackson Dart, and now when you throw in Jackson, all of a sudden you have probably your best offensive player now out for the season. That's just a brutal blow. I do hope it's not an ACL injury, but by most accounts, it probably is going to be. So huge loss for this team. They're going to need Wan'Dale Robinson to continue to step up. Darius Slayton's going to have to make some plays, and this offensive line has to run block well. But I like what I saw. This was a positive day for the Giants. A good victory versus a really, really good Chargers team. And I think the most important thing, Jackson Dart looked really, really solid out there. Even though it was a pretty simple game plan, he still made the throws and made everything easy for this offense. Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans losing 0-26 to the Houston Texans. Now, I want to talk about this game from the perspective of a Titans fan. If I was a Titans fan, I'd be very disappointed with my team, but I would really like to put the blame on one guy, and that's their kicker, Sly. You got to make those field goals. They had the ball down the field. They had an opportunity to score 3 points to start the game off, take the early lead. He misses it. Then you have a chance later in the game to, I think it was to tie it up or to cut the lead to 3. He misses it again. You take away those 2 field goals, that's 6 points. Do you want to know how many points the Houston Texans had heading into the 4th quarter? 6 freaking points. If Sly had made those kicks, it would have been 6-6 heading into the 4th quarter. And at that point, the ball game is totally different. Instead, he misses the field goals. They score nothing the entire day. Houston gets going in the fourth quarter and puts up a good number of points there to really make the game look like it was a blowout, but the score was 6-0 heading into the fourth. CJ made some things happen, and I think the biggest thing that did happen for this Texans team was that they got Woody Marks involved in the offense. By the way, super explosive athlete that I have been banging the chest for this guy to get more reps over Nick Chubb. Chubb can get you some yards, and Chubb is totally a respectable starter, but Woody Marks is that explosive athlete, that second guy who could just make the big plays down the field, and they finally got him going a little bit here. Nico Collins made some plays. We saw Jaden Higgins make a touchdown. Good positive day for the Texans. This game felt almost like a get-right game for them. They're 1-3. They got a long way to go, but this was a positive week for the Houston Texans. Now for the Titans side of things. Cam Ward made some mistakes. The interception wasn't really his fault. Eleke Omener made some plays, but man, they're really void of a lot of talent right now. Cam Ward is eating a lot of sacks. They can't run the football efficiently. Defensively, they're holding up, but this offense just is not good. One thing I did find interesting was that in the press conference after the game, Cam Ward basically called out his entire team and said, sorry for my language here, that we're ass. We're not good enough right now. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing from your leader to say that, but I appreciate the honesty at the bare minimum. Moving over to a 31-25 victory for the Philadelphia Eagles. This was a game of missed opportunity for the Buccaneers. They had multiple chances to make big plays. It just happened to be they couldn't really convert. They also just struggled in the first half and felt like everything was very difficult. Whereas for Philadelphia, man, you start the game off with a big special teams play, then you just methodically made plays down the field. Eventually, the Buccaneers started to figure out this Eagles offense, and in the second half, Philly only scored 7 points, but they were up 24-6 heading into halftime. It made things quite easy to sort of just sit on that lead for as long as possible. Shout out to the Buccaneers. I thought they did a nice job of coming back and showing some fight in this game. But when it came down to it, they could not convert despite the fact they had multiple opportunities. Of course, the interception that Baker threw was probably the thing that ultimately cost them the game, but you know, it was one of those things where they had chances on the field and they just did not convert. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Rams game where the Rams had opportunities, but they ultimately couldn't convert. Obviously a different game and a different style of game, but sort of felt like the same thing here where the Bucs had chances and moments, but they never could put it all together. Shout out Philadelphia, man. They have not gotten Saquon Barkley going, but I love some of the creative play calls they did when they got to the red zone. There's like an inside little dish pass to Dallas Goedert. We've seen that play a couple of times. Then they had a really cool play where you had like a diamond formation with 3 guys in front and Goddard in the back, and it almost made sort of like a wall in front of him where Jalen got it, pitched it over to Goddard. Goddard had 3 guys blocking, and it was just a walk-in touchdown. I thought that was pretty cool. Philadelphia, to me, is proving they are the best team in the league. They can win ugly, they can win clean, they can throw the football a little bit now, despite A.J. Brown not playing particularly well, and that's not really his fault. He's just not getting a ton of opportunities. I hope to see the pass game really start to get going here because it got going in the second half last week, and in this one it got going at times, but it wasn't consistent. Moving over to the Patriots blowing out the Carolina Panthers 42-13. Let's start off with the positive side of things here because I have a lot of things to say about the negative side of things here. Let's start off with Drake May and the Patriots. Heading into this game, I talked about how this was a good opportunity to sort of see where both of these teams were at. For the Patriots, we saw them in the first 3 weeks, and they had highs, they had lows, they made mistakes, but ultimately they were what they were. With the Panthers, you also saw the highs and the lows, and they were who they were. So heading into this game, you wanted to figure out, okay, which team is heading in the right direction and which one's really not. I predicted the Patriots would win, but I also thought the Panthers would look good in defeat, and I was wrong. The Patriots, they handled their business. They were up 28-6 at halftime. They finished the game 42-13. By the way, Bryce only scored one of those touchdowns. The other one was Andy Dalton. It was just disappointing from this Panthers team. Now, for the Patriots side of things, look, their offense played great. They were clean. They moved the ball well. They ran the football decent enough. They made some plays in the pass game. Shout out to the special teams. They made a ton of plays. This was just a nice performance from all 3 sides of this Patriots team, offense, defense, and special teams. Now, for the Carolina Panthers side of things, what a disappointment. You had a 30-0 blowout last week where you were like, oh man, we're heading in the right direction. We're making plays. And you follow it up by losing by, 29 points to the Patriots, who are not a great team? It's just disappointing, and I think we need to start having the conversation about Bryce Young and Dave Canales. It feels like this has happened now 3 years in a row where we're seriously talking about, okay, who's their head coach and who's their starting quarterback? You obviously want it to be Canales and Bryce Young, but this was supposed to be the year they put it together, and it's kind of been anything but that. They've really struggled. They have not had consistency passing the football. There's nothing explosive going on. They have no ground game. The offensive line is not playing as good. And Dave Canales, in my opinion, is not putting his team set up in success. It's been quite frustrating for the Panthers. They're a better team than what this score indicates, and at the end of the day, they've been blown out. Moving over to the Buffalo Bills defeating the New Orleans Saints 31-19. Now, this game got a little bit more dicey than I think anyone expected it to be. It was, in fact, so dicey, the Saints went down and almost scored a touchdown to take a lead late. Fortunately for the Bills, Brandon Cooks dropped the touchdown. Wasn't really his fault. It was a weird pass, but he dropped the touchdown. And of course, they had to settle for 3 there. So it was just a game where the Saints, man, kind of like weeks 1 and 2, they stuck in there with some decent teams and they ultimately lost the game. But they stuck in there and made enough plays to keep the game respectable and close. And then eventually they let go of the rope, or they just couldn't convert on a game-winning drive. That's kind of what happened here versus the Buffalo Bills. They had them, you know, where they wanted them in a lot of ways, keeping the game close within 1 possession. It was 14-3 heading into halftime. They were within a couple points heading into the 4th quarter. A couple things go their way and the Saints actually win this game. Of course, those things don't happen. Josh Allen takes care of business and they find a way to win this one. A lot closer than what you might want it to be, but this has kind of been the Saints formula so far. Spencer Rattler hasn't won a game yet, but he's playing good football. Now, this game was maybe his worst of the season so far, and that's kind of expected when you go up against the Bills. But Rattler still no turnovers, only 126 yards on 18 completions, but yeah, I thought he did fine. To me, the big story for the Buffalo Bills through 4 weeks is James Cook. James Cook has simply put been awesome so far this year. He is playing at such an elite level right now, and every time you give him the football, it's like an explosive play just waiting to happen. So shout out to James Cook, shout out to Khalil Shakir for a big play, shout out Josh Allen for making enough plays late. All in all, good win for Buffalo. It was a game in which it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but you beat up on a Saints team that is really competitive, so shout out to them. Moving over to the Detroit Lions defeating the Cleveland Browns 34-10. Now, I know this is not a sexy win for the Detroit Lions. Oh, you beat the Cleveland Browns, whoop-de-doo. But when you kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, you look at this game and you say, this is actually a pretty good win for the Detroit Lions. The Browns have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They beat the Packers last week, which we'll talk about here in a little bit because the Packers beat the Lions. Now the Lions beat the Browns, who beat the Packers. So that's kind of how that one floats. But this Browns team was also competitive in week 1 versus the Bengals when they had Burrow and Chase. And then in week 2, they were competitive versus the Ravens until the Ravens, you know, blew them out late. But still, very competitive game. So despite the fact this Browns team is 1-3, they've gone up against, you know, 3 teams that will probably end up making the playoffs and 1 team that, if they were healthy, maybe would have made the playoffs. So this Browns team is actually pretty good. And what did the Lions do? They handled their business. It was a little bit dicey early on because the Browns went down and scored. And it was like, oh, maybe this Browns team is going to, you know, pull off back-to-back upsets versus the NFC North. And then the Browns made mistakes. They had turnovers. And the Lions converted. They took advantage of things. And the Lions just played good enough offensively. It was not a clean day by no means for the Lions. I mean, they threw an interception. They were 6 of 14 on 3rd down, 0 for 1 on 4th, 6 penalties. But they also were able to get after Joe Flacco a few times. They also forced 3 turnovers. They did their part on 3 of 14 on 3rd down. And I think one of the more impressive things that happened for this Lions team, they only gave up 0 sacks. That's huge versus a defense that has a lot of guys. That Browns defensive line dominated the Packers last week, and they did not do so against the Detroit Lions. So shout out to the Lions. Obviously, I talked about it a bit earlier. The Packers lost to the Browns. Now the Lions beat the Browns. You know, obviously that week 1 matchup still lingers, but man, it's really building up for that Packers-Lions rematch to be an epic matchup. Moving over, let's talk about our 3 p.m. slate. The Jacksonville Jaguars defeated the San Francisco 49ers 26-21. Now, Brock Purdy did return this game, but I felt like you saw some of the rust for Purdy. He didn't play a clean game. 2 turnovers. 1 wasn't really his fault, but it did get tipped. It still led to an interception. 22 of 38 was the completions on the day. He just did not play great football. Unfortunately for him, this offense is just so banged up with injuries that it feels like it's a shell of who they typically are. And defensively, without Nick Bosa, the Niners defense, it felt like it did take a bit of a step back. The Jaguars surprisingly have a great defense this year, so that makes life a little bit harder for the returning Brock Purdy. I thought Purdy made enough plays to keep the game close, but when it mattered most, the turnovers really hurt, and they just couldn't make the plays necessary to win the game. Whereas for the Jaguars, they made plays on special teams, they made plays on offense. Trevor Lawrence probably played one of his more clean games of the year. They also ran the football well too with Travis Etienne, and Brian Thomas Jr. did have 5 catches for 49 yards. Hopefully this offense is starting to really pick things up. I don't think they played great this game, but I thought they made enough plays to ultimately win the game. As for the Niners, this is a disappointing loss, but you're still 3-1. Your schedule is still pretty easy. I don't think they're going to win the division. I do think that's the Rams, but I do think this Niners team has a great chance of making the playoffs. It just happened to be that they lost this one versus a Jaguars team that is also 3-1 and not a bad team at all. Moving over, let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts losing to the LA Rams 27-20. Now, if you watched my predictions video, I almost called this exactly what I thought it was going to be. I predicted the Rams to win, but I also predicted that the Indianapolis Colts would keep this game very close and still look really good despite a loss. And that's basically what happened here. The Colts had several opportunities, and man, they made a ton of mistakes in this game, but they only lost by 7 and had some legit chances late in the game. Let's get this out of the way. The 2 big plays by Adonai Mitchell were just devastating for this team. He has a wide open touchdown. He fumbles the ball out of the back of the end zone while celebrating. That's 7 points off the board. Then he has a massive, holding penalty on a Jonathan Taylor touchdown. That's 14 points off the board because of 2 Mitchell mistakes. If you throw on the 14 points this game, well, you can do the math. It's 34-27 Indianapolis wins. Now, that's all hypothetical. Of course, things could have changed, but still, those are big plays that got taken off the board. You also got to talk about the penalties, man. Too many penalties. 11 penalties on the day for the Colts. It costed them over and over again. You also had 2 interceptions. Of course, one of them came late when Daniel Jones was just trying to do a little too much, but he had the earlier one in the game too that wasn't very smart. I thought Jones still made enough plays, and I thought this Colts offense still showed life. But man, the mistakes by Mitchell basically cost them the entire game. But they were competitive versus a really good Rams team, so I could take that, and if I'm a Colts fan, I feel pretty good despite us losing. Now for the Rams side of things, Matthew Stafford played very, very well. 29 of 41 for 375 and 3 touchdowns. Kyron got some things going. He made some mistakes, but he played pretty well. And we got to talk about Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua, as of today, would be my offensive player of the year. He is playing incredible football. 13 catches for 170 yards and 1 touchdown. He is right now far and away the best non-quarterback on the offensive end right now. He's playing at such a super elite level. And this is a big win for the Rams. Last week, you had the disappointing loss versus Philadelphia. Then you had a tough matchup to follow up against this Colts team that is really good. And even though I do think the Colts probably could have won this game, you got to give credit to the Rams for winning and making the plays necessary to ultimately win the game. Stafford's playing well, Puka's playing well, their front 4 is playing well. Everything well is going on now in LA. It's not all perfect. They've made mistakes, so have the Colts. This was a great game for both these teams, and I think both these teams will be in the playoffs and will be threats within their conference. Moving over to the Kansas City Chiefs dominating the Baltimore Ravens 37-20. In what was maybe the most shocking game of the week, if not the most, one of for sure, the Chiefs showed life offensively, and this Ravens team, wow, what a disappointing start to their season. Coming into the year, the Ravens were my #1 team in the NFL. They might not be in my, in fact, no, they won't be in my top 10 after this week. They're 1-3 on the season. Lamar Jackson just had his first stinker of the year, and this defense is just bad. It's a bad defense. They gave up 37 to a Chiefs team that has been horrible on the offensive end. They have not been good heading into this game. Heading into this week, man, they struggled versus the Chargers. They scored 21 points that game, 17 versus Philadelphia, and 22 versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity for the Ravens to figure things out defensively while they go up against an offense that has no firepower. But man, despite the fact that their leading rusher for the Chiefs was still Xavier Worthy with 2 runs for 38 yards, man, they dominated. Patrick Mahomes looked incredible. 25 of 37 for 270 and 4 touchdowns. You got multiple guys. The football, Worthy was big on the game. What a massive addition for this offense he was. Travis Kelce made some plays. Juju, Hollywood Brown. This Ravens defense just had no answers. Now, in fairness, they are missing some guys due to injury, but to me, that's no excuse. You still have a bunch of talent on that side, and you're really struggling right now. And I'm worried about this Ravens defense. And on the offensive end, Lamar goes down with a hamstring injury. We'll see how long he might be out for. They couldn't get much going with Derrick Henry. Only 8 carries for 42 yards. Really nothing going on there. They got down big after the first half, and then they were just trying to recover, and they just couldn't do it. Just a disappointing day for the Baltimore Ravens, but what a bounce back game for the Chiefs. A lot of conversation about this Chiefs team being screwed, not being the same team they used supposed to be, and they responded. They played well and had their first like dynamic offensive showcase in a couple of games now. So shout out to the Chiefs. This was a big win. This was a good confidence builder for them, and they're just going to get better once they do get Rashee Rice back. As for the Ravens, and if they don't get Lamar Jackson back really soon, their season could be in jeopardy, because if you miss Lamar for, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks, you got Cooper Rush in there. I think Cooper's a fine backup, but he's not going to win you too many games. And they have some pretty tough matchups upcoming. They have the Texans, who responded well, and I'm sure the Texans offense might play well too in that one. You have the Rams, that's a tough one, the Bears, and the Dolphins and the Minnesota Vikings. So there's some winnable games here, but you got to get Lamar Jackson back. If he's out for an extended period, this is big bad news for the Baltimore Ravens. And lastly, let's talk about the Chicago Bears defeating the Las Vegas Raiders 25-24. This was an awesome game from start to finish. A lot of mistakes on both sides. It was not the cleanest game ever. Geno Smith threw 3 interceptions, which has to be cleaned up. They also had a fumble from Ashton Genty, but the Bears also made their fair share of mistakes too. An interception from Caleb Williams, 7 of 16 on 3rd down. I mean, this was not a clean game by no means. 8 penalties for Chicago, 5 for Las Vegas, but man, it was still a fun game in general. Back and forth game here where the Bears had momentum at times, then Las Vegas got momentum going, and then you got some stalling points, and this and that happens. It was just a fun game. The biggest thing for this Raiders team is that Ashton Genty had by far his best game of the season. 21 carries for 138 yards and 1 touchdown. He also had 2 touchdowns receiving as well. As for the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams made some mistakes, but he still played relatively well. 22 of 37 for 212 and 1 touchdown and a pick. Not his cleanest day, but he made plays when they needed to make them. Rome Odunze continues to be that wide receiver 1. He had 4 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. This was just a solid day in general for this Bears team. Just was a bit disappointing for the Raiders to not be able to pull out the victory despite getting your team in field goal range late. It got blocked. The Bears win the game. So shout out to the Bears for going 2-2. Raiders have to be disappointed with their start to the season, being 1-3 and just figuring things out right now. But getting Genty was the big thing that they needed to do, and they did so in this game. Now, as for Monday Night Football and Sunday Night Football, we'll be talking about those in future videos, so keep an eye out for those games. I do think the Packers will win, and I also think the Dolphins will probably win, as well as the Denver Broncos. So check out my predictions video if you want to hear more about that. I'll talk about those games throughout the week. If you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.